Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View on this Tuesday, June 11th, 2019 day. My name is Nick Pitts, the host of the Millennial Roundtable on the Point of View show. So grateful to see you all and have you all join us here today. I am joined at the Millennial Roundtable by the one, the only Chelsey Youman. Chelsey, how are you today?
I'm doing good.
Okay, well, thank you for asking, Chelsey. I still don't have power. I don't know what's going on right now yet.
Are you going to be okay?
So I'm not going to be okay, but I'm going to have to get this out of my system for a little bit. I am so grateful to be here in the Point of View studio, primarily because our house still does not have power. And so for the listeners that are in the Dallas area right now, there are 97,000 other individuals that join me in not having power right now. For our Minnesota audience, they're unaware of the storms that we have.
Now, Minnesota, I know you guys have the snow, but tornado season and thunderstorm season here can be so unreal.
Okay, so were you here on Sunday when it happened?
I was here. Okay. So I live like just out of where the quote unquote rain bomb dropped.
Yeah.
So it was really, really crazy, and we had tornado sirens going off, but it wasn't like trees weren't being uprooted where I was.
Okay, so for our Minnesota audience and then for Dallas audience, we'll give you a little bit of an update. So Minnesota audience know that storms, it was apparently it was crazy. It was like a 30-minute bomb that just dropped in the Dallas area. Mm-hmm. Straight winds up to 70 miles an hour.
Let me explain what it is, because I actually looked this up. I'm not one of those people that watches the Weather Channel. I would love to be a tornado chaser, actually, but I just don't. I'm not one of those people that watches the Weather Channel. Okay. I watch other ridiculousness, but I looked it up because it's crazy. So it's like a whole pressure system, and the pressure is keeping all the rain inside the storm for like maybe hundreds of miles. And then all of a sudden the pressure switches and all that rain comes out at once. And so there's backwards pressure pushing all that rain down. It rained, I think, between 6 and 10 inches in 45 minutes.
Unreal.
Hail, tree. I mean, it looks like a war zone here, and people have been without power for days. I have people sleeping on my couch. I have people putting food in my freezer. I love it though, because it's like a slumber party. You know?
I love it. I love it.
But no, it's been bad.
Okay, so here's my perspective. I was in Colorado for work the past week, and then for fun over the weekend, and just stayed for fun with some friends over the weekend. And I'm flying back on Sunday, and as soon as we're about to take off in Colorado, the captain just says, "Hey, we're going to take a little bit of a different path. There's a line of storms that's coming through Oklahoma." I thought, okay, whatever. We're leaving on time, etc. And then we land in Dallas, and when I open up my phone, and because I'm a millennial, I go straight to Twitter, and I'm looking through Twitter, and they're talking about these atrocious storms that have just fallen Dallas. And I'm looking outside. I'm like, what has gone? It's absolutely beautiful. I'm trying to think through.
Literally sunny for an hour before and sunny the hour after. And I'm glad that you didn't fly in, because one of my research let me know it's actually one of the rare types of storms that really downs planes. Like multiple planes have crashed because of these storms.
It was literally 30 minutes after the storm had already made its way through. We took a different route in. Ooh. So I get in, I'm wondering, what are all these storms? Was this delay? All of these delayed? So then I make my way into Love Field, which is the Dallas airport. Pandemonium. It's crazy how many people are just all in Love Field and very frustrated because you can tell when there's been frustration because there's individuals that have been sitting around at their gates for an extended period of time, and there's kids that are, as you would expect, kids are very much wanting some type of attention.
What do you mean? Kids are really good in airports and in confined spaces.
So then when I'm making my way to my house, I'm seeing all these trees that are down. Like I'm not talking like little baby trees.
No, full trees were uprooted.
Trees are gone down, and so we're finding out that 350,000 people were knocked out. Power was knocked out from them on Sunday afternoon because of this. And now we've got about 70 to 80,000 people.
And for perspective, for our northern friends, it is still in the 90s outside.
Yeah.
It is June in Texas.
So I am living currently my house. We're in day 3 of without electricity, and it is. I like to think of it as I'm living pre 1870.
Just channel your inner. Survivor and
so like what I'm doing so if you're watching on Facebook, you can see like I don't have a suit on because I don't have any public meetings, 1, and 2, it's just extremely hot in my bathroom, as you would expect with a house that's been sitting without electricity for 3 days. And I know you can't tell, but I haven't shaved in about 4 days right now. So like the beard is coming in so strong right now.
This is your version of roughing it. Golf polo
golf polo and not and whiskers on my face.
Just own it. Get that channel your inner camper.
Yeah. But unfortunately, I do have some stuff that I'm gonna have to do tomorrow. So I'm gonna have to brave the sweat, but hopefully power will be restored tomorrow and I won't have to deal with it.
Hopefully.
But as of right now. But nevertheless, if you are tired of me complaining about some of the weather, know that we're going to switch topics here shortly. We've got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking a little bit about this letter by some CEOs, specifically upwards of 200 CEOs signed a letter indicating that the abortion bans are bad for business. They're trying to put some pressure on these states that continue to level some of these regulations and bans on abortion, talking to you, Georgia, talking to you, Alabama. And so what are we to make of that? We'll also be talking a little bit more about chemical castration, which was a new bill that was passed in Alabama of all places. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then politeness in politics. We're going to revisit a conversation we had last week over the role of decency and civility in the political square. And so Chelsey and I were going back and forth on this over email last week, and I'm really looking forward to discussing this with her. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit more about, did Fox News go too far? According to Chris Cillizza of CNN, when Fox News commentator Sean Hannity started questioning the veracity and questioning the health of former Vice President Joe Biden, Chris Cillizza of CNN said that, quote, Sean Hannity went too far. That should be off limits. And is that the case? Did he go too far? We'll be talking about that as well. And so, but we are wanting you to join the conversation as well. And so we are going to be opening up the phone lines for this first hour, as well as opening up Facebook. So if you'd like to jump on Facebook, you can go to www.facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Again, www.facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Go over to the live video feed where you will see the rugged me that hasn't shaved in 4 days. You can see when my face isn't behind the mic, and what you'll see, and you just leave a live little question or comment that you'd like to add to the conversation, and we'll be sure to get to it over air if we have the time. Or you can jump on a phone call. You can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. But we're going to have to go to a break right now. But when we come back from the break, we're going to talk a little bit more. Specifically, we're going to hone in on that topic of upwards of 200 CEOs signed a letter, put an ad out in the New York Times indicating that these abortion bans and these regulations have gone too far. And they're calling on states, they're calling on the customers, they're calling on the culture to change in order to make it more conducive for their business. We'll be talking a little bit more about that, but you can go to the Point of View website at pointofview.net to find out more information on that particular article. But we've got to go to a break. But when we come back, the abortion ban, is it bad for business? Right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, over the years, I've written about how people in high-tax states have been migrating to low-tax states. Unfortunately, many politicians in those states want to argue that tax rates don't affect investment or even migration. But the latest data from the IRS demonstrates that once again we have tax migration. Between 2012 and 2015, a net of $8.5 billion in adjusted gross income left New Jersey and $6.2 billion left Connecticut. Illinois, for example, lost $13.6 billion. However, during that same period, Florida, with no state income tax, gained $39.3 billion in adjusted gross income. You can even see tax migration between high-tax states. As an editorial in the Wall Street Journal puts it, income flows down the tax gradient. New York lost a net of $850 million in adjusted gross income to New Jersey and Connecticut, but at the same time, New Jersey gave up $335 million to Pennsylvania. Now, it might be tempting for politicians wanting to raise taxes to write all of this tax migration off to merely an example of snowbird flight. After all, people have been moving from the Northeast to Florida for decades. But the examples I just cited show that it is more than just a migration to warmer climate. It is a migration to low-tax states. The tax migration, especially the affluent, have had a negative effect on state budgets. Revenues have fallen short in states like New Jersey, Illinois, and Connecticut. That has resulted in budget deficits that have forced legislatures to cut public services and even funds to local government. The local governments have responded by raising property taxes, thus increasing more tax migration. All of these facts and figures are a reminder that people vote with their feet when you tax their pocketbooks. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism. Viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, and joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Chelsey Youman of the First Liberty Institute. And we're going to jump into the topics of the day. And specifically, I want to hone in on an article that I mentioned at the very beginning, at the top of the hour. Jack Dorsey, Emily Weiss, and 185 other CEOs signed a letter calling abortion bans bad for business. So more than 180 CEOs have signed a letter opposing laws and regulations that restrict women's reproductive health care, including abortion. The ad appeared in the New York Times under a full-page ad under the heading "Don't Ban Equality." It's coming in the midst of what we know. Several states are starting to put regulations and laws that are trying to outlaw and limit abortion. Such states include Georgia, Arkansas, Indiana, Missouri, as well as Alabama. Twitter CEO and Square CEO, Jack Dorsey, along with fashion designer Rebecca Minkoff and others, have signed this letter to send a clear message that restricting the process is against our values. And they say, quote, "Such legislation inhibits our ability to build diverse, inclusive workforce pipelines, recruit top talent across the states, and protect the well-being of all people who keep our businesses thriving day in, day out." Chelsey, I wish sometimes that the eye rolling could talk, because that sometimes that would probably be just as rich. But go ahead.
I don't even know where to begin with the backwardsness that is this letter. Okay, it's nonsensical, it's illogical, and it's a reach at best for them to delve into what they view will be politically advantageous for them to comment on.
Yeah.
It is, at the very least, they think they're appealing to millennials who care about social issues. Yeah. And to me, it is, at the very least, it's completely self-interested and really shows their hand. First and foremost, abortion is a human rights issue for an unborn child, for an innocent child. And so they speak to the equality issue on women and the human rights of women and completely neglect that there is a second being, an autonomous human being, to really speak to. But besides the actual issue of abortion, this is really just about business for them. Yeah. It's about making money, and it has no bearing whatsoever on their, quote, ability to build diverse and inclusive workforce.
Yeah, it's funny.
That's your choice. Yeah. Hire diverse and be inclusive in your hiring practices. Abortion has no bearing on your hiring practices.
I can't imagine what if a pregnant woman worked at one of these. I can't imagine if a pregnant woman worked at one of these companies and what this message signals to her that we want to push this forward. I just think
anything, it says that pregnancy is a hindrance to business, which is indicative of the 1970s and 80s.
Yeah,
if anyone's ever watched 9 to 5 with Dolly Parton, this really is reminiscent of that era to me.
But let's
I'm sorry, pregnancy is such an inconvenience to you, H&M, who I'm now boycotting.
Yeah, seriously, because that's one of the things I wanted to highlight. So you have one of these companies. I did a little bit of research. I'm working on this white paper for My Faith Votes on kind of similar along the lines of impact investing. So impact investing would say, why give your money to companies investing-wise that you would expect a return on? So like you're investing in the stock market. Why invest your money in companies that are then going to use the profits to be philanthropic to agencies like Planned Parenthood, to agencies like NARAL, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the things that I'm working with, you've got JP Morgan Chase, you've got Starbucks that's given at least six figures, as best as I can tell, from tax returns to Planned Parenthood.
I'm glad you're doing this research, because I've had multiple people ask me, is there a list out there? Can we have a comprehensive list of people we can't do business with because our dollars will go directly to supporting abortion?
So you've got
good work, Nick.
You've got H&M, that's obviously one of those. You've got companies like Bed Bath & Beyond, that's one of those. You've got Starbucks, you've got Chase, you've got Bank of America. It is frustrating to the high end. But at the end of the day, though, one of the things that we have to remember, and you alluded to this, Chelsey, is that that companies are simply just going to give consumers what they want. And tragically, consumers increasingly want companies to take social stands. But this particular social stand is really interesting when you look at the numbers. So the majority of consumers want companies to take social stands on social issues. I think the number's anywhere from 68 to 66%. But then when
by the way, surprises me, because I think, look, they have a First Amendment right to speak to these issues. Absolutely. Yeah. Corporations are made of individuals who have views. But I want my companies to be companies. Yep. They're not politicians.
Yep. And so it goes back, it's kind of going in the vein of kind of a corporate social responsibility that we're starting to see is very in vogue now. Millennials are the largest generation that's in the workforce, and increasingly they want to work for companies that align with their particular values. But this is where the breaks down, though. This is why I think it's just such a bad move for companies. Millennials are pro-life. Like the majority of us are pro-life. Like even if you look the breakdown among the American populace right now, across the American populace, it's 47-47 right now. If individuals have to decide between whether they're pro-life, pro-choice, or neither, it's 47-47 according to the latest study. And then when you break it down with Democrats specifically, the number of individuals that are identifying as pro-choice has decreased significantly over the past 7 months right now. And so we're starting to see, and this kind of goes back to what we've always known to be true, is that when the science comes into this, when more information comes from
when undeniable, factual truth is known, it changes hearts and minds. Because I think we as creatures, we're intuitively logical people. And so a logical person who is a feminist can read this letter and say, this seems a little bit discriminatory against pregnant women, or this seems a little bit anti-woman. They're waving their equality banner. They're waving their women's empowerment banner. But did you know that 60% of women have abortions to quote unquote because someone else wants them to? And 30% almost have abortions because they're afraid of losing their partner. Does that sound like a choice to you or duress? It sounds like women making choices that are not theirs to make. It sounds like women are being duressed and pushed and intimidated into choices they would not otherwise make. I even heard another statistic that 75% of women seeking abortion, so those who have determined I want to have an abortion, when asked the question, if all of these circumstances were changed, if X, Y, and Z were changed for you, would you want to keep your baby? 75% say yes. So when we want to talk about women's empowerment and equality, let's talk about the circumstances they're in and helping them out of them, and saying you don't need a license or a permit to have a child. Yeah. You don't need a socioeconomic status or a certain degree to have a child. Like, having a child is something anyone can do and have, and empowering women to enable them to do that well is what we should really spend all of these resources doing. All these rich CEOs speaking into this issue could really make a dent in this problem from a social standpoint for women if they wanted to empower women instead of make a buck.
Yeah, so I was doing some research on some of the CEOs and their companies that had signed on this letter, and they obviously what the letter indicates is that they represent 108,000 workers. But I would dare say there's a CEO of a company called And Pizza, and so I was looking up some research on And Pizza and what are some of the benefits that they have for some of their employees. And so while the CEO is wanting to champion the idea of allowing abortions,
their maternity leave is terrible.
Paid.
Yeah, no paid maternity leave. Why? Because they're telling you what they want. They said it's bad for business if you get pregnant. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're telling you.
Yeah, it's just. Sorry,
I'm very fired.
Oh no, I can tell. I like it. And so help me to let's think through this, because one of the things that I don't want to happen is I don't want us to and not to say that we ever do. I want us to think well about this. And so when I think about how do you respond to the individual that would say, well, the woman should have the right. The woman should have the choice to be able to decide to do what she wants to do with her body.
Right.
What's your response?
I'll tell myself to calm down and take the heat out of the situation, and let's just neutralize it. No, let's neutralize it.
The heat's in my house. Let's bring the heat into
Let's talk logically. Okay, we got to neutralize it.
You can talk logically and heatedly.
I know, I probably will. But in what scenario historically have we ever justified power and authority? We've ever justified gaining that through killing innocent lives? Name a scenario where it's ever justified to say I'm powerful and I have authority over someone else in a tyrannical manner, and I have the right to kill someone else in order to have that empowerment.
Yeah, I can think of 2 mistakes that the U.S. has made in that, but there are none.
You can think of a lot of mistakes. You can think of a lot of historical examples. Even going back to the Hellenistic era, I was talking to one of my coworkers who is classically trained about, there's, and of course I can't remember the word because I have a terrible memory sometimes when it comes to names. But he was talking about there's a concept even in the Hellenistic era where in order to gain power and authority, in order to shed innocent blood, and that's a biblical concept as well, it's not justified authority. And so the women's empowerment argument, when we scale this back to this issue, is that I can be empowered, but it necessitates the taking of a life. And you can't get away from that. Yeah. I mean, you have to look that in the eye and deal with it on its terms.
Well, one of the things I want to continue to do, but we've got to go to a break right now, is try to deal with some of the talking points of the pro-choice side on its terms. And thankfully, we have an individual like Chelsey Youman here to help us do that. And so we'll be back, though, right after this.
There is no more dangerous time than when things are going well. Remember Elijah on Mount Carmel? Fire came down. There was no doubt who was God, but what happened next? He went from amazing faith to a time of great fear and depression. Many Christians have been very thankful a certain Democratic candidate for president was not the one to nominate 2 replacements for the Supreme Court. But as with Elijah, times of great victory are also times of great danger. Moments like this are not the time to take it easy. This is not the time to let our guard down. This is a time to double down on our work in the community, to serve and pray and plan and invest in a better future. This is the time to join Point of View's Truth Team 360 to make sure today's promising gains are not lost tomorrow. Show your commitment to our future by visiting pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Ask to join the Truth Team. pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Chelsey Youman on this Tuesday, June 11, 2019 day. The Millennial Roundtable, we have been talking about this letter. Nearly 200 CEOs put out a letter and a full-page ad in the New York Times talking about how it's bad for business when you're putting these abortion bans and regulations into place. And so to kind of quote some more from this letter, it says, quote, restricting access to comprehensive reproductive care, including abortion, threatens the health, independence, and economic stability of our employees and customers. Simply put, it goes against our values and is bad for business. It impairs our ability to build diverse and inclusive workforce pipelines, recruit top talent across the states, and protect the well-being of all the people who keep our businesses thriving day in and day out. It may be bad for business, but I do know, Chelsey, that it's deadly for children when these companies are starting to speak up on this regard. And so one of the things that we were doing before the break is talking through what are some of the common talking points that pro-choice individuals are utilizing, and one that cannot go understated right now is the idea of a man, the idea of a doctor coming in and telling a woman what she can and can't do with her body. And so help us to respond to that and help our listeners better understand how can they respond to that, such a common refrain that you hear in this state.
Sure. So no one is telling a woman what they can and can't do with their body. Like, women have freedom to use contraception, to be celibate. Women have a lot of freedoms in this context, but those arguments all ignore what I call dealing with abortion on its terms. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about abortion, we can't discuss abortion without talking about the second life involved, the second being, the second body involved. The second body is obviously the child. And most of these arguments ignore that because they can't get around it, right? They have to give that human life dignity. They have to be willing to discuss it. And once you start actually talking about what abortion is and dealing with it on its face, those arguments fall by the wayside, because to me, quote unquote, empowerment and control cannot, in any context, can never be justified by violence and the shedding of innocent blood. So in any context on earth, war, tyranny, any context, power and authority cannot be justified by the shedding of innocent blood. And when you just break it down to really basics what it is, I think it's really clear that it's hard, but that's not the answer. And the second thing I want to deal with is really the lie that's perpetuated. All of this has an implication that women are weak. And so from the feminist movement and those that are supposedly all about women's empowerment, they're implying women can't do this. That it's somehow shameful or negative that our bodies can create life. I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing that God partners with women in this specific way. It's the only way in my lifetime I've ever specifically been involved in a miracle. And the fact that God entrusted me with that is a beautiful and a good thing. Pregnancy is a beautiful thing. And it's a testament to our value and our dignity as women, that we can get pregnant and that we can have children. And we are strong enough to do that. And I think it's society's burden and the church's burden and even the government's burden to enable women to have the right socioeconomic support systems around them and communities around them to help them along the way. But I think that it just tells women they're weak, frankly, to say that they can't do this.
I was listening to a panel in, where was I last week? Denver, of all places. I was listening on a panel in Denver last week, and there were individuals that had been considering abortion. It was actually kind of pretty neat, just because it was outside of a Christian context. It was in an economic context. But one of the women said something that just was like this powerful refrain that just, I don't know what it was, but maybe it was just the context. Maybe it was the Spirit of God illuminating something new in my heart when she said that all through this time, I just wanted somebody to say, you can do it. Like, I thought, my God, like that was like, I don't know why that was so simplistically powerful for somebody to come alongside and say, you can do it, because everybody else is saying you can't. They're looking for give you excuse.
Like, you have to remember when I'm talking like this, like, I am not neglecting the woman who is oftentimes in desperate, stressful, or lonesome circumstances. And so we have to deal with her. I'm not saying we neglect the woman. I'm saying we actually empower the woman by helping her. And, you know, you're not the only one who someone has said that to. I had someone I know very dearly kind of just disappear for a few years and then resurface. And everyone was like, where did you go? And she came back with a 1-year-old. And she said, the one thing when I was telling people I was pregnant that nobody ever told me that I wish they did is that I could do this. The exact same statement you said, that everyone said it's going to be too hard. You can't do it. But she made the choice to say, I'm going to take this leap of faith, and it's scary. And she has, luckily a support system around her that ultimately could help her through some of this. But that speaks volumes. The statistics speak volumes. 68% of women who have abortions say they're doing so to please someone else. 28% of women are doing so because they're afraid of losing their partner. So those statistics, I think, really just take the wind out of the sails of the other side, who is saying, this is about women's choice. These are not women who feel like they have a choice. They're women who are under duress and in desperate circumstances, and they need to be loved and cared for and not given a quick medical fix, according to the other side. They need someone to come alongside them and help them through this. And that can be done through pregnancy resource centers. There are tons of pro-life organizations out there, through churches, through communities. There's so many resources available. Young Lives is a great resource to have other mom friends in your age group going through the same thing. So I know it's a difficult thing to speak about, but there are so many just lies and misinformation on the other side. I think it's important to have these conversations.
And I think one of the things that I want to touch back on that kind of relates with this is just the idea that you talked. That was a really powerful comment that you made about 2 minutes ago, where you said that that was a part of a miracle in this, and there was a special bond that happens between a mother and her child. And so one of the things that I'm not from a heartfelt way, but from a social scientist way, so I'll bring in my kind of some of my doctoral work, is this idea of de-individuation, right? And so when we dehumanize things, we typically don't have as much empathy or as much intimacy with that very thing. And one of the tactics the other side has utilized is this idea of de-individuating the child, specifically not calling it a child, calling it a fetus, or simply saying that it's not a person, like it's about empowering you. But one of the comments that you made is recognizing that this isn't pro-woman, because there could be a woman that's growing inside of this mother. And one of the things that we know through de-individuation is that we typically don't act as sympathetically or as kindly towards individuals that we don't see as human. Perfect example of this is, while many of you are listening to us while you're on the road right now, you will drive atrociously because you are de-individuating the other people on the road, because you don't see them, you see their car. And because there's that layer, you're more than willing to cut them off. Whereas if you saw them in a grocery store line, you would never cut them off. You would never cut them off because you literally have more closeness with them. And so I think about that from your comments about the power that lies in individuals when we're making those arguments of being able to say, you know what, that's a child that you have. There's a bond that you're creating right now, and creating a fullness to that, I think, would be very important.
Yes. I mean, this is what I get back to when I say we have to give them human dignity, because they have a heartbeat at 5 weeks that's detectable definitely by 8. Yeah. They have nails in a short amount of time. I mean, my sons, they put off their own testosterone in there. So I was super aggressive during all my pregnancies because they're individual beings. They got their own testosterone. And, all my coworkers were like, oh, we know you're pregnant. And I was like, how? And they were like, it's fine. I get real mean. So, I think to lend dignity to the human side of this, and really the antidote to that is to actually look up what a DNC is. Let's just look it up. And I think, Live Action was a media group who does PR on this issue, and they just started showing a medical video. So it was a portrayal, not a real baby, of a DNC, and the guy was pro-life, and he watched the video, and afterwards he said, that's barbaric. You can't deny when you see it. You just the antidote to these lies is truth. The antidote to it's not a child. It doesn't matter. It's a clump of cells. It's to get on the sonogram and watch and to know what's happening. And it's really undeniable when you really start to look at what these things are.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we can point to, especially with this idea of actually seeing what it is one, the baby that was born out of California 2 weeks ago that we see, or not 2 weeks ago, rather, a baby that was born that was 21 weeks, and now it's just being she's just being released from the hospital now as young as 21 weeks. They were able to nurse her in order that she might be able to go home with her parents. And then what we're seeing on the flip side as well is just this need for us to continue to see the humanity of these children. And then in turn, hopefully that changes up not only how we respond to the issue, but also how we can help the mothers in this as well. Because again, the choice lies with them. But we've got to go to a break. But when we come back from the break, more on Point of View right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. No one likes a test, at least not the kind that are unfair, meant as a pass-fail standard upon the character of a person. And that is why the framers of the U.S. Constitution included a prohibition on a religious test for office in Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution. But did that federal prohibition apply to the states? That's a question presented by Roy Torcaso to the Supreme Court of the United States. Torcaso, a professed atheist, wished to be a notary public in the state of Maryland, but could not declare his belief in God as required by the Maryland Constitution. Justice Hugo Black explained in Torcaso v. Watkins that the prohibition on religious tests for office in the U.S. Constitution was to be extended to state constitutions as well. He wrote, "Neither a state nor the federal government can constitutionally force a person to profess a belief or disbelief in any religion." Well, that's similar to what James Madison wrote in Federalist 52, where he explains that the door of this part of the federal government is open to merit of every description, whether native or adoptive, whether young or old, and without regard to poverty or wealth, or to any particular profession of religious faith. In other words, you don't have to pass a religious test to qualify for public office in America. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. Let me ask you, what if America's best attorneys from the very top law firms got together to defend religious freedom in court? That's exactly what's happening at First Liberty. And the best news? We're winning over 90% of our legal actions. Come learn more at firstliberty.org. You'll be encouraged. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, on this June 11th, 2019 day. I'm sorry, I'm still not there. I blame it on the power being out. But nevertheless, it's on here, and so I am exceedingly grateful that you've decided to join us. And I'm joined by Chelsey Youman of the First Liberty Institute here at the Millennial Roundtable. And we're going to transition a little bit. We've been working in, because we're in the Dallas audience, and specifically we've got Minnesota that's tuning in right now. And so, Chelsey, I don't know if you remember this or not. I think you were a part of the first Millennial Roundtable where we had the news you can use segment.
News you can lose.
News you can lose.
You can't use it. It's absolutely useless.
One of these days, I'm eventually going to get used to this. Lose. Okay, I'm going to write it down. So news you can lose. And so we're going to transition, and we're going to move the news you can lose segment up to this particular hour, just because we're here in Dallas and Minnesota, and then we'll transition out into the national hour here shortly. So we thought we'd give you, listening audience, because we always talk about it at the very end of the show, which is at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock rather Central Time, for this audience, we'll go ahead and do that now before the larger national audience joins us. And so are you ready for the news you can lose, Chelsey?
I'm never ready for it, but I'll try my best, guys.
Okay. Dodgeball is a tool of oppression used to dehumanize others, according to researchers. So a new research paper has come out and appeared in the European Physical Education Review. And in the article, it found that dodgeball in phys ed classrooms teaches students to dehumanize and harm their peers, according to professors from 3 Canadian universities said in a presentation. Researchers observed that the more athletic and authoritative students in the class established rules and practices without input from other students, including creating their own teams, which allowed them to gang up on students. So there's one of 2 questions that could be asked, Chelsey, right now. The first being, were you good at dodgeball, 1, and 2... Oh, no, I'm not even going to change it because I saw her face now, and I now want her to say how bad she was at dodgeball.
I was so bad at dodgeball. I was like, I tried to be really brave.
Yeah.
I'd be like really fast to the line to get a ball, and I would just get pummeled.
Oh, so
I really tried.
Okay, so you were usually one of the first ones out?
Yeah, I was one of the aggressive ones they're talking about in this study.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have a good arm, actually. So I was like really good at hitting other people, but I was like not.
You never got the chance to actually hit anybody because you always got out.
Smacked in the face all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so how about you? Because for those listening audience that don't know, Chelsey has a twin sister. Chelsey, was she better than you?
My sister is a super athlete.
Oh, okay.
So she was like 3rd all around in the state or something as a gymnast growing up.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, don't hold me to that. Like I was little, but she was rock star, gymnast, little Miss athlete. She's 5'2". I'm 5'6" for our listeners. Yes, we're twins, but we're very fraternal.
Okay.
The 5'2" sister was incredible at basketball.
Okay.
And I'm like 5'6" and was horrible at basketball. But I did volleyball. I was really good at volleyball.
Okay.
I was captain for a little while.
Watch out.
Watch out. But no, my sister is a super athlete.
Okay.
And to this day, like, she's just a little powerhouse.
Okay. And coming as no shock to our listening audience, I was not good at dodgeball. I was what they might say a little chunky. And so I wasn't necessarily the most athletic individual, I guess you could say.
What they say, some would say.
And so I got put out quite frequently. But one of the things that I didn't do, though, is I was unlike you in that I did not charge. I recognized that if I charged, I would never get a ball because I was slow, 1. And 2, I would do better if I just stayed on the back and tried to dodge from the very back. And even though I didn't dodge all too well, I still managed to somehow stay longer into the game. So let's go to some of the research on this, because I've been to Ouch Town plenty of times, as they say in the movie Dodgeball. So is there anything good that can come from dodgeball? Well, according to research, it's shown that it improves hand-eye coordination, strength training, and agility and balance. But so when we hear this study, though, some of us are thinking to ourselves, well, is it really bad? Is the Chelsey? I'm putting
competition.
I'm going to put you on the spot right now. You've got 2 sons that are going to be making their way into dodgeball arenas here shortly, if they're not already.
They're already in it. Yeah. Let's be honest. My house is a dodgeball.
They're just in the minor leagues right now. And so, when you think about your kids playing dodgeball, do you think this is a good thing that you want them to do? Do you think this is a bad thing that you would prefer they didn't?
I'm really okay with him playing dodgeball.
You're okay with him?
Look, I think there's a great place for sports, team sports, competition. Everyone has their own different views, but I mean, as long as like no one's actually getting injured, like go for it.
Okay.
Get that energy out. I wish they could play dodgeball right now. Get all the energy out. And there's something okay with knowing your place a little bit. Like if you're not the best at something, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
Yeah, I'm keenly aware that's okay, because that's been the story of my life. My life. Okay, no, but so here's one of the things that Jonathan Haidt brings out in his book, The Coddling of the American Mind. He says that we're living in a culture of safetyism today, where safety is a sacred value and a determining factor by which we filter all the activities that we do right now. That if it's not safe, then it's not something that we should do. One of the corollaries of that, one of the examples that he uses, is this idea of peanut allergies. That peanut allergies, because a couple of individuals, a small segment of the population got peanut allergies, many people stopped using peanuts, and it only increased the number of people.
I know. I feel really
peanuts.
bad. I didn't know this ahead of time because I sent a PB&J sandwich to with my son to his little class, not knowing that it's like a peanut-free zone.
Yeah.
I got reamed out to the next level, and I was just like, I had no idea it was so extreme.
Well, see, that's
the
one of the
allergies
things,
are very extreme now.
The lack of tolerance, because the presence of peanuts has only made us more and more sensitive to us. So Jean Twenge brings up this great point in her book on iGen, and she says that, quote, 18-year-olds now act like 15-year-olds used to. 13-year-olds now act like 10-year-olds. Now, obviously, the peanut allergy is the scientific comparison that we're given. But when we're not allowing children to be able to experience difficulty, when we're not allowing them to fail, it's hindering development and it's hindering their aging process. And so as Christians, I would argue that we know the power of getting pegged. Specifically, when we look at the biblical narrative, we know it to be true that there's great value in failure and rejection. We think about it from a Joseph standpoint, where he got rejected by Pharaoh as well as the individuals that were down there in the prison with him. But it was in that rejection that Joseph was able to learn the culture and the systems by which that he would eventually go to lead and be the second in command next to Pharaoh. We think about individuals like Peter, and Peter, all those lessons of failure that Peter experienced inculcate that resilience in him, that going to Ouchtown, getting pegged, might not be the most fun that we can have, but it can be very formative. I know, like, I got pegged a lot. Like, I was not good, and it wasn't just in dodgeball, but I also know this in other instances as well. But, like, I think we can both agree that there's value in losing, there's value in getting rejected, there's value in not necessarily succeeding all the time, because it shapes your character. So,
you said it well. I can't even add to it.
Thank you. But nevertheless, we're going to have to take a break now. And so when we come back from the break, when we come back at the top of the hour, we're going to continue our conversation with news that you can possibly use and not necessarily news you can lose. And so we'll be talking about, did Fox News go too far? And so there are individuals within the Fox News system that were questioning the mental veracity of former Vice President Joe Biden. And so we will be talking about that. Did they go too far, as Chris Salissa of CNN points out? And then we'll also be talking about politeness in politics. In the political square, is there room for decency and civility anymore? Or simply is it no holds bar, the first one to accumulate the most power and reorder society? Is that where we're living in today? There's a large conversation that's going on. It's been going on since last week, really, that we will continue to talk about as well. And then chemical castration that's happening in the South. We'll talk about that and more right after this.
Why should you become a partner with Point of View Radio? Because for decades, this team has made a significant difference in lives and communities across the nation. Because America is dying for lack of biblical wisdom about life and culture. You should give because your gift will make possible cutting-edge information on issues that matter, information you won't hear anywhere else. Why? Because your gift will change lives, because you'll influence our culture with biblical truth, and because you can make a difference for the future. Our nation needs a truth team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Click on Join the Truth Team and choose your level of support. Pointofview.net. Or call 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed. thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View on this June 11, 2019 day. I am your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Chelsey Youman, also significantly afraid of heights, as we're finding out. Yeah. And I'm putting you on blast right now.
Not so good with the heights.
She's making fun of me for my story in Thailand. And then also joined by David Fraga as well here in Dallas. David, how are you today?
Doing awesome, Nick.
Oh, so good, so good. And so we are making our way through the show today. So excited that you have decided to join us, and so we have got quite a show for you today. Chemical castration, of all things. We're going to be talking about chemical castrations happening here in the States. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Bills that were signed down in the South, and so we'll be talking a little bit about that. Did Fox News go too far? According to Chris Cillizza of CNN, individuals and commentators, Fox News went too far when they questioned the mental capacity of former Vice President Biden. Did they go too far? Is CNN revealing a little bit of hypocrisy in this moment? We'll talk a little bit about that, and then we've got to talk about this. We talked about this last week, and now we've got Chelsey here at the roundtable, and I can't wait to argue with her over this. The role of politeness in the political square. It was started off by an essay that was put out by First Things magazine earlier in the week and earlier 2 weeks ago, and it has sparked a significant conversation within conservative circles as to the role and the significance of politeness. And in the essay is called "Against Frenchism," so kind of titled and taking aim at an individual named David French, who is been a friend of the show and been on the show numerous times, talking about him and his role, his decency. And so we are going to be talking about that as well, and looking forward to going back and forth. And then we just got through talking about the CEOs specifically. They've signed a letter, upwards of 200 of them signed a letter saying that abortion bans are bad for business. And so we talked about that a little bit during the first hour. You can find more information on that conversation over on the Point of View website at www.pointofview.net, or you can make your way over to the Facebook page and find a live streaming video of that conversation at www.facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And so without further ado, we're going to jump on into it. But before we jump into it, since we got our larger audience that's with us now. David, do you have power right now? I don't know if some of our listeners might know that we had a crazy accident that happened in Dallas, or crazy storm that happened in Dallas, knocked out power to almost 400,000 people within the city. And now, still to this day, Tuesday, midday, there's upwards of 80,000 people that don't have power at their house. Do you got power?
Yeah, I just got power this morning.
Got power this morning? Okay.
Yeah, so 2 days without power,
Yeah, well, you win. And Chelsey has always had power. She got the power.
Always.
So for our listeners, I'm sorry that I'm so casually dressed. I don't have power, haven't had power now, moving on day 3. And if this microphone wasn't in front of my face, you would see this huge beard that I have right now. Right, Chelsey? I've got this manly 4-day beard that I'm rocking right now because I don't want to spend an extra 2 minutes in my bathroom because it's so warm there, because it feels like summer here. It's about 80, 90 degrees here And so as you can imagine, it's not necessary. I don't really want to stay in that bathroom. So I've decided that of the things that are necessary for me to do, putting on deodorant trumps shaving. And so I've got this massive beard, and it doesn't look like whiskers whatsoever, right, David? Like you're jealous of it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I imagine that you are jealous of it. So nevertheless, I've realized that I haven't had any meetings that I've had to go to. You've just got to put up with me through radio, and so I can look like this. But thank you for giving grace to me in that particular space. And so let's go ahead and talk about, did Fox News go too far? This was an article that we posted on the website, and what we're finding and what we're seeing within this article is the idea that Fox News has gone too far, according to Chris Cillizza. So he says, quote, "For anyone who watches Fox News Channel, it's not that surprising that its anchors and hosts, with a few notable exceptions, talk up President Trump while knocking down the Democrats running against him. But he is taking qualms with what's happening, specifically with one of the Fox News commentators, Sean Hannity, have done." And quoting Justin Bragana of the Daily Beast, he says, quote, "Since the end of May, Fox Business Network and Fox News star Sean Hannity has speculated on air at least 4 separate occasions that current Democratic presidential frontrunner is secretly dealing with health issues, often comparing his condition to illness-related conspiracy theories the network pushed about Hillary Clinton during the 2016 election." When you hear about this kind of stuff, David, I don't know about you, but I can't help but think about 6 months to a year ago when individuals were questioning the mental capacities of President Trump as well. And now Chris Cillizza has decided that he's gone, that the Fox News has gone too far, which 6 months ago we were saying that Chris Cillizza and company were going too far by making much of the mental health issues and status of President Trump. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I would say what is going too far in terms of news media, because they've been pushing the line for quite some time now, both sides, the right and left. And so, honestly, I try to avoid a lot of just an opinion between both sides, because a lot of it is super biased, right? So you see Hannity, he talks about how Joe Biden, he's tired, right? But then you see from CNN, you say, okay, Trump, he's got some mental issues, he's being childish and whatnot. Yeah. So there's not really a line. There's not really, how could they say if you're going too far if there's not really a, politically correctness of cordial, being kind to one another per se,
Chelsey, has he gone too far?
No.
No.
First of all, we got to always consider the source. So CNN writing about a politically motivated Fox News is pretty much the pot and the kettle situation. So, no, I'm not going to take CNN at the word.
There's a Spider-Man meme where it's like 2 Spider-Men that are
I feel like it's like 2 people on Facebook, like Facebook warring. Like that's how petty this whole article was. And the second thing I would say is, I hope this is not offensive. I don't know. Is Sean Hannity a journalist?
No, I think he's
like a talk show host.
He's an op-ed guy.
Yeah, he's like a political commentator. Yeah. So it's what we're doing here. I would not call myself a journalist. I would call myself a very opinionated commentator, right? So
fierce storm.
Right. So I'm going to be biased. I'm going to have opinions and speak to them. Fox News has political commentators and talk shows where people are free to give their opinions. Now, of course, truth matters. So if Sean Hannity isn't basing this in any actual facts or any internal intelligence he has from his circles, then it's what I would call at best negligence or misrepresentation, which would not be good. Yeah. But I don't think anyone watches Sean Hannity and thinks wow, he's a journalist.
Yeah, I think one of the things that individuals are pointing to is the reality of what used to be known as an Overton window, of the things that were right, things that were within the bounds of conversation, civil discourse. And what we found now is that it's not just the left.
He didn't call him ugly. He said he
just question the mental capacities of an individual, and then well, I'm not going to say that.
Oh, okay. I did miss that. I'm sorry. That was not nice.
So you're just going outside those civil bounds, which begs which will raise and kind of tie in to the larger conversation that we will have right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, over the years, I've written about how people in high-tax states have been migrating to low-tax states. Unfortunately, many politicians in those states want to argue that tax rates don't affect investment or even migration. But the latest data from the IRS demonstrates that once again we have tax migration. Between 2012 and 2015, a net of $8.5 billion in adjusted gross income left New Jersey and $6.2 billion left Connecticut. Illinois, for example, lost $13.6 billion. However, during that same period, Florida, with no state income tax, gained $39.3 billion in adjusted gross income. You can even see tax migration between high-tax states. As an editorial in the Wall Street Journal puts it, income flows down the tax gradient. New York lost a net of $850 million in adjusted gross income to New Jersey and Connecticut, but at the same time, New Jersey gave up $335 million to Pennsylvania. Now, it might be tempting for politicians wanting to raise taxes to write all of this tax migration off to merely an example of snowbird flight. After all, people have been moving from the Northeast to Florida for decades. But the examples I just cited show that it is more than just a migration to warmer climate. It is a migration to low-tax states. The tax migration, especially of the affluent, have had a negative effect on state budgets. Revenues have fallen short in states like New Jersey, Illinois, and Connecticut. That has resulted in budget deficits that have forced legislatures to cut public services and even funds to local government. The local governments have responded by raising property taxes, thus increasing more tax migration. All of these facts and figures are a reminder that people vote with their feet when you tax their pocketbooks. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism. Viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Chelsey Youman of the First Liberty Institute and David Fraga here in Dallas. And so we are, this kind of moves to, we were talking a little bit about whether Chris Cillizza of CNN went too far, or whether he was arguing, rather, I should say, that Sean Hannity of Fox News went too far in his questioning and his comments relative to the questioning the mental capacities of the former Vice President Joe Biden, who's now currently running for the Democratic nomination for president in the 2020 campaign cycle. We stopped it there because then we understood the opposite has proven to be true as well. That there are individuals at CNN, I can specifically look back to what was happening with Chris Cillizza, was actually one of them that was continually reporting and pointing out, questioning the mental veracity of President Trump when he had his first set of, I guess you would call those checkups that he was doing. And I alluded to the point that it seems as though we find ourselves in this in this public discourse now, in what's known as this Overton window, which is normative, which is right, which is within bounds the type of conversations that we could have. And I said as we went to the end of the break that it seems as though this Overton window is expanding, one, or it's just being completely thrown out, two. which gets us to the next piece that I wanted to bring up and what you'll find on pointofview.net. New York Post op-ed editor Sohrab Ahmari published an essay 2 weeks ago, this lengthy essay entitled Against David Franchism, that talks about specifically there's so many layers to this piece that it just begs for us to hopefully know when to cry as we try to peel back this onion. And hopefully I'm not going to be the one that cries, because I'm looking forward to going back and forth with Chelsey on this as well. And so what the Sohrab Ahmari, what Ahmari says is that, quote, he wants to fight the culture war with the aim of defeating the enemy and enjoying the spoils in the form of a public square reordered to the common good and ultimately the highest good. That is I guess you would argue, that is the basic premise of his article. How we engage the public square, and not only how we engage the public square, but what we do with that public square, which is specifically we fight the war, defeat the enemy, enjoy the spoils, and ultimately reorder it towards the ultimate highest good. What spurs him to write such a lengthy essay in First Things, which is a Catholic Catholic journal magazine? Well, what spurred him was what we all know, what increasingly becoming more prevalent here in the U.S., these drag queen story hours is what spurred this article. These drag queen story hours have populated within 14 states now, and not only have they populated within 14 states, traditionally they find their homes in public libraries where a drag queen, an individual that is dressed in drag, goes to these and they host these story hours with these children with an effort, one, to entertain them, and then two, to educate them on these new gender norms, I guess you would say, according to that. And so Ahmari pins this essay calling for, one, we've got to do something because we're losing whatever it is that we once had. Two, we've got to change the tactics of how we're going to do this. And three, we've got to have a new end goal. And so there's three, the way that I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Chelsey, the way that I see it is there's three layers that really beg for us to be able to think through and try to consider, especially from the Christian perspective, is one, what are we moving? Are we moving towards an area where we want Christianity to be enshrined as the ultimate good for everyone, regardless of religious affinity? So this would go back to the classic liberalism versus libertarianism understanding. Do we want a pluralistic public square, or do we want almost a theocratic public square, is what he's kind of hinting at here. The second would be the role of politeness in this public square. Should we give up the idea of being polite, decent, civil people as we engage this public square and fight these culture wars? Or, since the other side is being so vicious and wants nothing to do with it, nothing to do with us, rather than simply squelch our voice, do we have to up our game? And three, what is the particular end goal? Is it peaceful coexistence in this public square in order that we might be able to persuade one another? Or is it simply individuals that are going to be able to operate in such a way that move towards a particular end?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a lawyer, so I'm all about the way you frame things, right? No, this is hard. I've been grappling with both sides and the retorts, frankly, for weeks now. And so just y'all have grace with us as we're never going to get any of this right. But as we start to just unpack some of this, I think it's fair to say, for me, how I viewed this is at the surface level, this was about civil discourse. And the question there is, do we continue to engage with debate with the other side and use winsome rhetoric and dignity towards the other side to try to win them over to our side? Or do we use the governing powers that be to really just ignore whatever they're saying and win through a structured way? That's the surface level question for me. The underlying question is going to be, really, this comes down to libertarian views versus classical conservative views. And this is a divide that has been around since the beginning of time. We're aligned for a lot of reasons, really out of the 50s, because we had to be against communism. But the two groups have always had these kind of principled divides, individualism being on the libertarian side above all else, and on the conservatism side saying, look, the government's role is to be a structured force for society, even in social settings, to do what's good for society as a whole. So really, in my mind, when I read these, I was like, that's the two issues we're talking about, and then the way we talk about them is like kind of secondary to me.
Okay, so then let's take one thing for example. Let's just go one at a time. The role of civility as Christians in the public square, because our distinctiveness in this conversation is going to be the Christian perspective. So as Christians, does civility still play a role? Do we still need to be persuasive and winsome? Is that still a primary value? Or as Amari says, is that a secondary value now because the enemy isn't going to reciprocate that civility and that winsomeness?
So this is hard because what we're doing is convoluting our Christian principles with political ones.
Okay.
So in my mind, how do I say his name?
Amari.
Amari, he's making a political argument that persuasion and truth and the dialogue and the debate against the left in a political sense is not going to get us anywhere anymore. And that because of that, we need political reform. That's a political argument. French's argument is a Christian argument, that regardless of the conversation, we are called to be kind, speak truth and love, and engage that way. I actually have a lot more in common with French, not that I'm like as great or qualified as French, but I'm also a civil rights attorney. I've also gone to, literally dozens and dozens, if not 100 speaking engagements. Oftentimes at universities, I did a debate against an ACLU director in the state of Texas. And a debate against a head guy from the FFRF at the Bar Association. And so I, like French, have engaged a lot with the left and even the academics on the left or other activists on the left in the truth discussion and the kindness and winsome discussion. And I'll say this, my favorite thing, and one of the reasons I love being on the show is when you speak truth, people are logical and light bulbs start to go off. And I can't tell you how much ground I think I've gained for our movement by having the discussion. I was shouted down by these other individuals. I was literally, the FFRF guy stood over me and raised his voice at me, and I didn't have to go there. He was aggressive. I didn't have to be because I thought my points were valiant enough without the animosity. So in that way, I align with French. But that's because, on the Christian value side, I'm called to do that. Do I think that's going to win the movement? No. Overall, the answer to winning the movement is using everything. This is the same argument he was making, let the church be the church and the government be the government. If the church isn't going to delve in and Christians aren't going to delve into the political sphere, someone else will. And we're neglecting our duty as citizens.
So you don't think that there's a role for Christian principles and there's a distinctiveness for the Christian operating in the political square?
Wait, what?
Do you think that there should be a distinctive way that the Christian engages themselves in the political square?
Yes, I think the Christian should do what I just talked about, where we don't have to raise our voice and we have to treat each other with dignity. But I think we have to engage in the political sphere, and that's the point. Is we can't just sit home and say, well, we have to be nice and we'll let the culture change, and we'll let the culture change the politics, which is going to change the law. We have to engage.
Okay.
And not say laissez-faire.
Okay. We'll have to go to a break right now. I don't think anyone's arguing that, and so I'll be interested to go back and forth with you on that. What I'm really interested in are decency and civility secondary values in today's culture war. I think is probably one of the questions that was raised from this essay, and we will explore it more right after this.
So you sit down and do your budget, and you look at all your monthly costs and your bills and your income, and it seems like there's never quite enough. You know what would really help? Finding $500 a month to help balance things out. That is the typical savings, $500 a month for a family when you switch to MediShare for your health care. And when it comes to healthcare sharing ministries, MediShare is really the gold standard. It's been around for 25 years and has more than 400,000 members. It's been around so long and grown so much because it works. And whether you're single or married or have kids, this could make sitting down to do a monthly budget a lot more fun. $500 a month can more than cover a car payment or pay back loans, whatever. So join MediShare and go out to dinner to celebrate. Here's the number to call. They are incredibly kind and helpful to talk to. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
Tired of fake news? Support truth. Join Point of View's Truth Team and bring healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team. pointofview.net/team or 800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick
Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, on this Tuesday, June 11, 2019 day. And we have been talking about this Sohrab Ahmari piece that was published in First Things that talked about, kind of was peeling back quite a few layers. And what Mr. Ahmari was arguing for in his First Things essay is, quote, that we fight the culture war with the aim of defeating the enemy and enjoying the spoils in the form of a public square reordered to the common good and ultimately the highest good. That in this battle, what he says is, quote again from him, progressives understand that the culture war means discrediting their opponents and weakening or destroying their institutions. Conservatives should approach the culture war with similar realism. Civility and decency are secondary values. We should seek to use these values to enforce our order and our orthodoxy, not pretend that they could ever be neutral. And so, David, I guess the question that I would have for you is this. Are decency and civility secondary values for the Christian as they engage the culture war?
As they engage the cultural war? I would say, oh man, it's tough. So I would say no, because we are called as believers to love one another, right, in the midst of everything. But at the same time, in order to gain some influence, what the world will say is good is to discredit someone, is to humiliate someone, to push them down, to be over them, right? But Jesus even said the first will be last, or the last will be first, you know? So it's humbling yourself in a way, but at the same time, you have to understand the Christian narrative in politics. There's it's a struggle. You know, I feel like there's such a struggle for a lot of believers who are like, okay, do I engage? Do I not engage? Because if they don't engage, then is that being obedient to what God is, or is that being a good steward, right? But if they engage, then you need to understand there's boundaries to that in a way.
Yeah, and so one of the things that, again, I think you engage. You engage.
Of course, you have to engage.
But that's not, to be fair, I think you're framing it a little bit differently.
Okay.
I think his point is that's the question. I think he views Frenchism, which is wrong. French debunked this himself, he viewed it as the libertarian, laissez-faire, live and let live. We can have a discussion, but we don't have to lean into the political side. This can all be decided off the record without political governing structures through dialogue. And I think that that's the real argument being made, is that no, we have to use governing structures to engage in social issues and cultural issues, to protect the unborn, to protect values, and not because we're creating a Christian kingdom, but because society needs some structure in place on the social setting. Our families are being eroded. Our birth rate is no longer sustainable. I mean, there are very real societal impacts from this culture war, and the only way to overcome those is to use the governing power that we have right now to reinvigorate those structures.
So one, I would say that he mischaracterized David French in his article. I think that's.
But what did I just say? You didn't respond.
No, but and the second thing would be my response to what you said. So the first thing I would say that he mischaracterized, and so this goes back to your comment of the laissez-faire. David French is anything but laissez-faire.
He's libertarian.
He's quite literally used the courts to be able to enforce a pluralistic public square.
That's true.
Not going back and saying that Christians have nothing to do with it, but rather saying Christians have everything to do with it and have a place in it specifically. What Ahmari's arguing, though, is that Christians would have an elevated importance, that they might be able to win the culture war and reorder the public square. That gives them a leadership position.
Do you think the public square needs to be reordered right now? Looking around?
From a classic
through our constitutional governing system. So not like, we're not talking reform from like we're going to throw away our government. Through our governing systems as a voter and through the powers that we have just with the nature of the Trump administration, does our society need to be reformed?
I would say that for our society or our government, public square. Because here's what I would say. I don't want a Christian. We've already seen when Christians take leadership and try to create theocratic systems.
I'm not saying theocratic.
I'm just saying that was Constantine and fourth century.
No one's arguing for Constantine.
I know. I'm just saying, but that's to a certain degree. That's what Ahmari's arguing. He's quite literally saying reordering the public square towards the highest good.
Let me back this up because we talked about this on the break. I think this is important for our listeners. We're hyped right now.
I know. I've got to slow down.
Okay,
I put this at the top of my thing.
What he is saying, let's back it up. And I might be wrong in interpreting this wrong, but this is my view. If we as Christians believe that God placed certain boundaries on us and told us to have certain types of family structures because it's for the good of society. And then we look around society and we truly see the repercussions that are happening from no-fault divorce, and that, the birth rate is no longer sustainable. We're seeing societal impacts from a sociological standpoint that are happening because of us straying from what we believe is an order that is what's best. So the question is, does the government should they have the authority to come in and reorder it to what we view as best for society? And I think Christendom is not only logical, but there's empirical evidence to show that mothers and fathers are what's best for family units. Mothers and fathers staying together are what's best for family units. Anxiety disorders are up. Depression rates are up. Suicide rates are up. Drug abuse is up. So when you look at the statistics, I think the government has an interest in intervening and saying on social issues.
Completely agree. But do the ends justify the means of doing that?
No, you're shifting the argument. What I'm saying is,
I know.
let me finish.
Okay.
The government has a very important role in society to protect our institutions, to lean into these questions, and not to say this is up to individual liberties. Individual liberty arguments have gotten us to Roe versus Wade, to no-fault divorce, to the lack of complementarity, to a whole host of issues that we're seeing repercussions of in society. And his argument is that the government, we have to lean in. We have a duty to our brothers and sisters to lean into these issues and reform them through the governing systems we have.
Yes, and amen to when, according to Christian principles, when you don't even put Christian principles and tie them back to the biblical narrative, that we've always found it to be true, that when Jesus says in John 10:10 that I've come that you might have the fullness of life, what we continue to see is that when Christian principles, when we see them illuminated through social science studies, it leads literally to a happier, richer life. Yeah. My argument for you is when you're engaging that public square, my question for you rather, when you're engaging that public square and trying to push Christian principles
it's not systems, pushing. It's not a fair way to frame it. Okay. It's not pushing Christian principles.
When you are enforcing, is that the right word?
No, when you're using government systems to advocate for
advocating for reform. Do the ends justify the means? By saying, no longer am I going to be civil, no longer am I going to be decent towards my fellow brothers and sisters, towards my fellow citizens, for the sake of the ultimate good. Is it okay to sacrifice your principles, to sacrifice your values, specifically for Amari's word?
Okay. We are called to speak truth in love. And so some people would say that the truth I've spoken, whether it's been at speaking engagements on the show about the unborn we spoke about earlier, some would say that that's unloving, but I spoke it in truth and what I believe to be love. I think the truth is loving. And so to the extent that he's saying we use these systems, he's, by the way, not saying we engage in a debate. He's saying the debate's over. It's been had. We lost.
No, he's saying that the reason why we get back into the debate is because we've already lost.
Yeah,
because we have lost.
Yeah, we have lost. And he's saying we don't forget the debate. It's over. The culture has won. Now we have all that's left is the governing systems. Mm-hmm. So, no, to answer your question, I think we always are called as Christians to be kind and show others dignity. But I'm going to speak truth.
Okay.
And they're going to call that unloving. And I'm going to speak truth. Okay.
Without gentleness?
I'm not always that gentle, no. But I'm going to try.
Okay, so the ends here's my biggest concern. Let me just go ahead and say my concern. My concern is that individuals would say that the ends justify the means. And one of the things that concerns me about that is that we have always got to be above reproach. The rationale is not that we would win the world, because what does it profit a man to win the world and to lose his soul, right? And so my ultimate goal is not political victory. My ultimate goal is faithfulness to my Creator. And I never want to have to sacrifice my values.
He views this as faithfulness. So you have to be fair to him. He views this as faithfulness.
He just says, he literally says in the article, though,
for the higher good,
civility and decency are now secondary values. I don't understand how you can be a Christian, because here's what I think.
You're on the love side and he's on the truth side.
No. I think I'm holding them both. Like I'm holding on to them both, because
you're holding on to a prayer. You're holding on to right now.
Here's what I think he does. Here's what I think he does, though. I think that he's willing to forsake the faithfulness piece in order to get to the political victory.
He views the political victory as faithfulness.
No,
You have to give him that.
I would disagree.
He's saying this is for the greater good.
I would disagree.
I would think. Here's what I really truly think, because this gets back to that libertarianism versus classical conservatism.
Yeah.
Libertarians are always saying, like autonomy is what's most important. Individuals, what's most, and he's saying, for the good of everyone, for the good of my brother, I care enough about my brother to say that this will not lead to life and happiness and fruitfulness.
Okay, we are going to have to take a break. I know that you wanted to say something, David. I apologize. We're going to let these other people on the commercial say something, and then we'll be back right after.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. No one likes a test, at least not the kind that are unfair, meant as a pass-fail standard upon the character of a person. And that is why the framers of the U.S. Constitution included a prohibition on a religious test for office in Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution. But did that federal prohibition apply to the states? That's a question presented by Roy Torcaso to the Supreme Court of the United States. Torcaso, a professed atheist, wished to be a notary public in the state of Maryland, but could not declare his belief in God as required by the Maryland Constitution. Justice Hugo Black explained in Torcaso v. Watkins that the prohibition on religious tests for office in the U.S. Constitution was to be extended to state constitutions as well. He wrote, "Neither a state nor the federal government can constitutionally force a person to profess a belief or disbelief in any religion." Well, that's similar to what James Madison wrote in Federalist 52, where he explains that the door of this part of the federal government is open to merit of every description, whether native or adoptive, whether young or old, and without regard to poverty or wealth, or to any particular profession of religious faith. In other words, you don't have to pass a religious test to qualify for public office in America. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. Let me ask you, what if America's best attorneys from the very top law firms got together to defend religious freedom in court? That's exactly what's happening at First Liberty. And the best news? We're winning over 90% of our legal actions. Come learn more at firstliberty.org. You'll be encouraged. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Okay, we're back, and we're still frustrated, fired up. Chelsey, I'm
not frustrated. I'm a cool, calm, collected cucumber.
Right. Yeah, right. So we have been talking about a piece that was put out in First Things Journal by New York Post op-ed editor Sohrab Ahmari against David Franchism. Really, this understanding that what Ahmari is arguing for is a reordering of the public square towards the ultimate highest good.
Nick, do you think the public square needs to be reordered?
I would argue no. I don't think it needs to be reordered. I think we have a great opportunity here in the U.S. to be able to advocate for reforms that we need to be pluralistic and understanding. I think that's why even in the biblical narrative, I would argue it's true, according to 1 Timothy 2, that we're to pray for the peace, because Christianity doesn't need a leveraged, it doesn't need a privileged seat at the table. It simply needs a seat at the table, so that, as C.H. Spurgeon says, I don't have to defend the Bible. I just have to unleash the Bible, because it's like a lion lying. I don't need to have a head start as a Christian in this public square because I believe it to be true that the truth wins out in this.
Well, I agree with you. So this is, I think, a really good way to just narrow it down for our audience because we got really convoluted, is to frame it this way. French is arguing for, in his paragraph, what you're saying right now, which is the marketplace of ideas is how we'll win. So we can forsake a commitment to liberty and launch the political version of ruin of our foes, which is what he's saying Amari is arguing for. But I would rather recommit to our shared citizenship and preserve a space for all American voices, even as we compete against those voices in politics and in the marketplace of idea. So what he's saying is what you're advocating for, which is we're a nation of competing worldviews and deeply held values, and this is going to be resolved on the culture side. To which I would respond with, we did that and lost on the culture side. So that doesn't mean I'll ever quit going to forums and speaking to people about truth and love. That I do think there's a place for winsome, principled ideas to prevail. I think we'll see that continually. But it's not enough. Let me finish. Okay. It's not enough. It's not enough to say we're just going to talk happy clappy and go to church. We have to engage.
He's not arguing that, though.
But what I'm arguing.
Okay.
What I'm arguing is we have to engage in the political systems, or else it's negligence of our society to say, we'll let the left do the left. They're involved in politics and we'll just talk at them. I'm saying, no, we have systems in place to save babies, to save lives, to protect our religious liberty freedoms. There's a whole host of tools that we're neglecting if we don't engage on the political side.
How would you say that we've lost, though? How would you say that we're losing, though?
Look around.
Abortion rates are going down right now.
Yeah. We are winning on the abortion side.
Religious liberty is
but
being
on the
protected.
family side.
But is that going to be solved by politics, though? That's my biggest thing.
So. Yeah, this is the libertarianism versus social conservative side. We are saying that the role of politics and governing institutions is to provide bumpers. If this is bowling, it's the bumpers for the bowling ball, and then we continue to engage in the debate and show people like we neglected our duties in the 80s with no fault divorce, and like let's look at the erosion of the family unit.
That's one of the things I'm frustrated. Like,
why can't we reform that? Why can't we look at a social policy that's failed and reform it?
I agree.
We got to reform failed social policies.
I agree. But this is where I think this is why I have one of my many qualms with Amari in this essay right now is he's got a political hammer and he sees every nail as requiring a political solution. And what I would argue for is that we do have problems here in the U.S. We are not perfect. This side of eternity, we will not be imperfection. But I don't think every problem that we have can be solved politically. I think the loneliness epidemic cannot be solved politically.
Well,
the loneliness epidemic, but in the UK though, they're trying to solve it politically. But they've appointed a loneliness minister.
Social conservatism isn't saying all issues are government.
I know you're not. I know you're not arguing for that. But what I'm saying though is Amari. It seems as though the thrust of his essay and the vagueness of the essay towards the particular end is what raises so many questions.
Yeah, I don't think he did it well.
No,
I don't think he did it well.
I think we can both agree that he didn't do
it was
well.
Almost a slanderous attack. A lot of it was not true. So I'm not aligning with him. I'm saying that I do see value to certain aspects of his argument.
I see aspects. I won't go that far.
You won't go that far? No, I know you won't. I know you won't.
I have a lot of frustrations with it. But I appreciated him putting it out there, though, because, again, it's a competing voice, and I want there to be the competition of ideas.
Ultimately, I agree with French. We're a pluralistic society, and I would never change that. I think I'm a First Amendment attorney. Yeah. I love a real good speech rally. Yeah. I love a good picket. I love the dialogue part. I'm saying there is a very important place that the church has neglected at the polls.
Okay.
And by using our government systems to reinforce what we have seen as failed social policies.
So here's the question then.
And reform.
So let's use your polls. Like you see, we're missing out. So should the government have a vested interest in power? And I know you're going to say no to this, but should the government have the vested interest to try to get Christians to go out to the polls?
Okay. I'm sorry. I got a little confused by what you asked.
Should the government then be reordered to such an extent that it solves the Christian problem of getting out to the polls? Should the government do something in that? Because that's what it seems as though
that's messing with the democratic process. I believe in democracy. I believe in our systems, our institutions, our constitutional separation of powers. So I'm saying it's the church's responsibility to get to the polls.
And that goes back to the larger point. I think Amari just has this political hammer and he's seeing every problem and he's trying to solve it politically, where I just don't think that's the case. I think the church problem for speaking out on the issues that the church needs to advocate for is not a political problem. I think that just needs to happen at the church level.
Let me say it this way.
Okay.
When Trump took office, do you
here
think...
we go. We actually...
I'm sorry, not Trump. Obama. I mean, say Obama. When President Obama took office, did he go in with the view to reform and change that which the former Bush administration had accomplished? And to turn back time and to institute his liberal principles as a liberal Democrat electee?
So here's where I would argue.
No, that's a yes or no. I'm a lawyer, you. Did he go in with the intent to reform and instill Democrat values?
I think that Yuval Levin, The Great Debate, phenomenal book that illuminates the two particular principles, and it goes back to revolution and reformation. Conservatives are bent towards reformation, understanding that history has allowed certain aspects to get to a particular place, and we don't need to neglect history. We just need to tinker with what's been given to us in order that we might allow
we
to
learn
change.
from our history, like our failed social policies that we've already learned from.
And so then what Democrats, progressives are going to say is that just because there's been some hint of just because something bad has happened in the past, it requires us to revolutionize everything, throw the baby out with the bathwater to try to start anew. And so I would argue from a progressive perspective, progressives are much more inclined towards saying because something bad is with us here in the present, we need to completely revolutionize everything that's happened, washing away what's past in order that we might create something
breaking
new.
it down and keeping it simple. So Democrats will come in to enforce their politics and their policies and their principles, underlying Democrat principles. I don't understand why Republicans, even Trump, who's a Republican, can't come in with the intent to enforce their principles, which might not be revolutionized, might just be reform.
I'm not saying that he shouldn't.
Well, that's all. I think that's what this argument's about. He's saying, like, let's use the platforms we have politically and through our government.
No, here's what Amari's arguing, though.
Our values.
Here's what Amari's arguing. Not just simply that we utilize and we reorder, even though he's vague as to what that reordering is. Not only do we reorder it, but we use unchristian principles to advocate for Christian ends. And I would argue...
He said they're secondary. He didn't say use unchristian principles.
I would say if they're not primary, then I got to watch out because I'm not going to be Christian here. So I would argue, that's distinctiveness for us. We're not given... They're commands. They're not... They're
right.
not
I agree with you that it's truth in love. It's both. I agree that it's both.
Like the commands are not options. And this is coming from a millennial, and y'all know the characteristics of millennials. We're flaky and whatnot, but those are commands. I'm not given the choice to be truthful in love. I'm not given the choice of not being gentle. I've got to be gentle. That's a fruit of a spirit.
Yeah, we can agree on that.
I've got to be gracious with this. I don't have the choice.
I'm just not obsessed with it.
Yeah, I just have to be obedient, like at the end of the day. And I know my obedience is for my Christian. We've got to go to a commercial break. We'll be back right after this.
There is no more dangerous time than when things are going well. Remember Elijah on Mount Carmel? Fire came down. There was no doubt who was God, but what happened next? He went from amazing faith to a time of great fear and depression. Many Christians have been very thankful a certain Democratic candidate for president was not the one to nominate two replacements for the Supreme Court. But as with Elijah, times of great victory are also times of great danger. Moments like this are not the time to take it easy. This is not the time to let our guard down. This is a time to double down on our work in the community, to serve and pray and plan and invest in a better future. This is the time to join Point of View's Truth Team 360 to make sure today's promising gains are not lost tomorrow. Show your commitment to our future by visiting pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Ask to join the Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Chelsey, Youman, and David Fraga. And so if you've been listening to us for the previous hour, please know that we have retreated to our corners. We have cooled down. Not really. No, we haven't cooled down at all.
No,
we have been talking.
Like you started maniacal laughing just a minute
exactly.
ago. And you think like Nick is fired up, y'all. You think I'm the fiery one.
I know. I can't help it. So one of the things that I'm always cognizant of is there's a line from Desmond Tutu that he says that don't raise your voice and prove your argument. And it kind of goes back to that dictum that whenever you allow emotions into the argument, usually that person is lost when they become very emotional in the argument. But I have found that I am just going to channel my emotions to create a more powerful, logical argument that not only can appeal to the head, but also to the heart as well. So what are we talking about right now, audience? What we're talking about is a Sohrab Ahmari piece that was put out in First Things magazine. What he's arguing for is the title of the article is called Against David Frenchism. And if there's two things that I would Two premise. This is a long form article. It's about 3,000 words. One of the things that is really difficult to try to navigate through is that there's some ambiguity as to what he really wants or rather what the premise is of this article. But it's made its way. It's the talk of much that's happening around the kind of conservative world right now. But what he's arguing for essentially is, quote, that when we fight the culture war, we fight the culture war with, quote, the aim of defeating the enemy and enjoying the spoils in the form of a public square reordered to the common good and ultimately the highest good. How do we do that? He says, quote, progressives understand that the culture war means discrediting their opponents and weakening or destroying their institutions. Conservatives should approach the cultural war with a similar realism. Civility and decency are secondary values. And so what he's arguing for, to a certain degree, leaving kind of vague, is one, this idea of conservatives need to quit being nice and to fight in the cultural war just like the other side is fighting for. And the question that I am concerned with, one, is this public square that he's wanting to, quote, make as that moves towards the highest good. What does that mean? Does that mean that there's competing voices that can be in this public square? Does that mean that Christianity gets elevated in this public square that enjoys a privileged position? I think we can all agree that there's ambiguity as to what he actually wants. The second piece, I argue,
I know what he wants, but nobody's asking me.
The second piece, here we go. Hold on, we'll get to this. The second piece that I would argue is, what does it profit a man if he gains the world and loses his soul? What does it profit us if we forsake our Christian values of civility and decency to approach the culture war and to fight and do so to justify the ends of whatever the highest good is if we don't do it distinctively Christian?
Okay, so we got to be fair,
okay.
Right?
So
to be fair, I by the way am not fully aligned with really either camp.
Yeah.
So we're just going to put that out there, but he is arguing what he believes is the soul of our nation. I mean, he believes this is faithfulness. And so if you believe that winning for the social good, he believes the highest order is, by the way, for the social good, and that it is important to win out of faithfulness to God, then it isn't fair to say he's forfeiting his soul to gain the world. I mean, that's not what he's arguing for.
But how can you?
I have an example. I have a live example. Okay. So let's just break this down. Planned Parenthood receives how many millions, maybe even billions of dollars from both state funds and budgets and the federal budget?
Upwards of $500 million.
Yeah. What he's arguing for is revoking funds to those institutions. The left has used our current governing institutions to fund their own causes and win in their own right. And it is time for conservatives to do the same, which means we defund Planned Parenthood and start funding women's clinics who don't offer abortions.
Okay.
That's a real basic principle. He's saying we're using the governing institutions to win. And talking about it till we're blue in the face in the public sphere is an example of how that's not really going to change that dynamic.
How will it not change that dynamic, though? Don't you have to put forward persuasive, winsome? Don't you have to put forward persuasive?
Well, some would
and
say
then
we
build
have, which is why the Republicans had the majority and why Trump won.
Well, then why hasn't it happened then? Right? Because then I would argue, because here's the thing that here's one of the frustrating things that I would argue for is this is one, I don't even know if he's arguing this because the ambiguity of what he's saying.
Okay, I have another example.
Okay,
let's use another example. Anonymous pro-life organization giving out truthful information about what a medical procedure of an abortion actually is got banned from Pinterest, who said it's against their policy to spread misinformation. The video was given by an abortionist. Like it was a doctor speaking to the procedure that he personally had given in his life.
Okay.
Got banned. Now the left is using these corporate entities and these private entities to shut down for this public forum, to shut down free speech, to not allow real, genuine, truthful information to be out there against us, who is their enemy, the pro-life entity, who's their enemy. Do you think that the pro-life entity has a right to use the legal mechanisms and government mechanisms to get their voice heard again?
Okay.
And to push back?
I think that they do, one. But two, would you say that there's a delineation that has to be made between the government and between Pinterest when it comes?
Well, now we're getting the trademark issue. I'm not talking about the trademark. I'm saying if there, let's just say hypothetically there was a private cause of action, because I do this all day, every day in my religious liberty world.
That's why I don't want to entertain this argument, because I know I'll lose.
So, do they have a right to use the legal remedies at law and the structures in place to win even without the dialogue?
I'm not saying that they don't have the legal rights to do that. I'm not saying that they shouldn't use the legal rights.
Okay.
I'm saying that if they're going to use the legal rights to do what he's arguing that David French doesn't do, which David French does do, to not forsake decency and civility and not forsake Christian principles when using the legal levers that you have to be able to be tolerant in the public square.
But the left, my point is that the left would say it's not civil or decent to challenge that.
I don't want to equate leftism, because I know Democrats that are Christians. Like,
that's true. I don't want to paint with too broad of brushstrokes.
I don't expect non-Christians to act like Christians. I expect Christians to act like Christians.
Yes, I agree with that.
And when I conflate winning with faithfulness, that's what I have a problem with. At the end of the day, I'm going to be called to account for my Creator, not the wins and losses that I did in the public square, but how I conducted myself.
So back to the example.
Okay,
the pro-life organization would say that winning in that instance helps them continue their mission that they've been called to. I mean, some of that does go part and parcel with each other.
I'd say fight, but do so in a distinctively Christian fashion. There's a narrative.
I agree with that.
There's a narrative out there, and we talked about this, and we'll get to it because we're going to come up on a break. There's a narrative out there that equates decency and civility with weakness.
A lot of times, cency and civility is in the heart eye of the beholder.
I agree,
and that's where it becomes difficult.
That is so wrong, because what we continue to see with Jesus is there's a meekness, but there's a strength there.
Yeah.
And what we see is Jesus at his strongest was at the world's weakest. And
he offended people.
I agree that he offended people, but he didn't
Gospel is offensive.
But he didn't forsake the biblical narrative when he was offending people. We've got to go to a break. I would say you could call in, but I don't know if we'd actually get to any.
No, I would love to hear what other people have to say about this.
Yeah, maybe that is the question. No, actually, you can call in 800-351-1212. 800-351-1212. Do the ends justify the means? Can you be unchristian to achieve Christian ends? We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, over the years, I've written about how people in high-tax states have been migrating to low-tax states. Unfortunately, many politicians in those states want to argue that tax rates don't affect investment or even migration. But the latest data from the IRS demonstrates that once again we have tax migration. Between 2012 and 2015, a net of $8.5 billion in adjusted gross income left New Jersey and $6.2 billion left Connecticut. Illinois, for example, lost $13.6 billion. However, during that same period, Florida, with no state income tax, gained $39.3 billion in adjusted gross income. You can even see tax migration between high-tax states. As an editorial in the Wall Street Journal puts it, income flows down the tax gradient. New York lost a net of $850 million in adjusted gross income to New Jersey and Connecticut, but at the same time, New Jersey gave up $335 million to Pennsylvania. Now, it might be tempting for politicians wanting to raise taxes to write all of this tax migration off to merely an example of snowbird flight. After all, people have been moving from the Northeast to Florida for decades. But the examples I just cited show that it is more than just a migration to warmer climate. It is a migration to low-tax states. The tax migration, especially of the affluent, have had a negative effect on state budgets. Revenues have fallen short in states like New Jersey, Illinois, and Connecticut. That has resulted in budget deficits that have forced legislatures to cut public services and even funds to local government. The local governments have responded by raising property taxes, thus increasing more tax migration. All of these facts and figures are a reminder that people vote with their feet when you tax their pocketbooks. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism. Viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Chelsey, Youman, and David Fraga. And we have been talking about the Sohab Omari piece, specifically what is, there's just so much to it. And if you've been sticking along, you know that there's kind of two pieces to this. One is he's arguing for a reordering of a reorder to the common good and ultimately to the highest good, this Christian public square to reorder it towards the highest good. What does that look like? There's ambiguity in his article to that, but I guess the point that we've been
Can you tell which side Nick is on? Ambiguity. I don't even need to say it. It's horrible.
He has been so ambiguous. He has been so silent. He argues so voraciously, and I can't even pronounce that right. He's been arguing so diligently towards a particular end that he's not even articulating and encapsulating, which is the frustrating thing, because then the other piece of what he's saying is the idea that we have to make secondary values civility and decency as we do so. And I think that's probably, and it goes back to what I was referring to before the segment. I know there are examples of individuals and entities that are Christians that have been weak, that have tried to emulate weakness, or not weakness, but civility and decency. But in reality, they haven't had the fortitude, they haven't had the perseverance when it comes to arguing in the public square.
Right, which is my hesitation. I just want to make myself clear in case I haven't already. It's not that I agree with him, it's that I understand the slippery slope argument, which is Christians over decades now have tended to neglect their civil duties and for the sake of love, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we're not going to engage, let the church be the church and the government be the government.
No.
And that's that's really, we've lost a lot from that. And so that's my caution there, is just to say we still are called to speak truth in love. And that means speaking truth. That means engaging in the difficult conversations. I've been yelled at. I've been shouted down. I've been intimidated. And I'm still going to speak the truth in love. I agree. And no one's trying to tell you don't speak the truth in love. I think what I am most concerned about is individuals that are emphasizing the truth component without the love component, that are willing to say that because these are biblical commands. It's not biblical advice that Jesus has given to us. These are commands to be obeyed, not advice to be heeded. And when we're engaging in the political square, one of the things that we're contributing towards, and this reminds me of the argument James Davison Hunter makes in To Change the World, is that we're manifesting faithful presence in that. So yes, we might not win the argument, but who's to know we could win a person that's in the midst of that argument as well. That's the thing about faithfulness. It's sowing seeds that we might not know and reaping a harvest that we might not expect. And that's one of the things that I'm always cognizant of when we conflate this Christian like the wins and losses in the political world. I might lose a political battle, but I'm winning. I could be winning something by sowing seeds of faithfulness. Not I could be. I will be. And I'm saying it doesn't have to be either or. It should be both.
Yeah,
it should be both. And that's how we got to how many years of Roe versus Wade not being overturned.
Yeah.
Guess what? Who could have resolved that? Congress.
Yeah.
Congress could have resolved that in 40 years.
But that's campaign promises.
No, this isn't relevant. Because what you're saying is we win on the culture side, we win in the public sphere, we win on the debate side. And I'm saying that's been left for 40 years to the public sphere, and there's still 1 million babies dying a year. And my point being, we can't leave everything in the public sphere. We're winning on the culture.
We're winning.
But babies are dying.
No, we're winning. We're winning. I know babies are dying, and I hate the fact that babies are dying. But I will say, though, we are winning, though. We're not winning on the culture or political. We're winning both sides.
It should have been faster.
I know
it should have been.
Dear God, I wish it was faster.
Yeah,
but you've got to argue, though.
I said we're winning on the culture side.
From a public opinion standpoint, more individuals are becoming pro-life. From a political standpoint, more regulations and bans are being put in place right now, and we're seeing a decrease over the past 3 years.
For every ban being put in place, there's a broadening law somewhere else.
I'm keenly aware that upwards of 2,400 babies
Congress should have done its job
every day because of abortion.
So should we keep doing what we've been doing?
I would say that we continue to be faithful. Like Eugene Peterson, the long obedience in the same direction.
Okay, but you're conflating some things.
Okay.
So I'm not saying not long suffering. I'm not saying not long obedience. What I'm saying is use the political systems that God has put to govern. Let me finish.
Okay.
That God has put over us to govern us, to accomplish what is right, and not waiting 40 years to do so.
Why are we not?
Are you advocating for like a revolution?
No, I'm advocating for voting in members of Congress who would have overturned Roe versus Wade, and they didn't.
So here's what I would argue, though. We have voted in members. We just don't look at the federal level. Look at the state level. That's where all the winning is happening right now at the state level. What's happening in D.C. We've got a Republican.
Look, I'm sorry if I don't think that we're winning on the political side if it's been 40 years. I don't call that a win. I call that a half a century of 70 million
so
lives lost.
Here's what I'm saying, though.
That is a stain on our country.
Who's going to do it, though?
The same as slavery. Let's talk. It's the same.
Hold on. We have elected individuals that have said that they're pro-life, but yet they continue to fund Planned Parenthood. What are we to do? We've been lied to, essentially, right?
I don't think we've got to engage more. First of all, I don't think that people are voting like they should.
Okay.
I think the church has consistently said that's politics for the church. By the way, the church has sat down on the abortion issue for years. They were not the biggest advocates.
No, the church has not sat down. Tragically, the church is the one. 50% of abortions are committed by individuals that are in the church.
Right. So what I'm saying is, by saying this is a political issue, let's just keep talking about it. It's not actually, the good work is not actually being accomplished, and we have a duty to both.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. One of the things that I want to be cognizant of is we have elected Republican-controlled House. President 2016, there was a Republican Senate, there was a Republican House, there was a Republican in the Oval Office, but yet Planned Parenthood still received over $500 million from the federal government. Is it the problem of the church not voting the right way?
Well, we have to hold those elected officials accountable.
Yeah, exactly. But
that's done through voting and through your primary and through vetting.
Mm-hmm.
and through, I mean, that's done in a lot of ways through the grassroots movement. I mean, that is what our country and democracy is about, is we hold those elected officials accountable.
I completely agree.
We lean into the systems that's at place. And when you're asking about what does winning look like, I think it can't just be 40 years like we've had. And it can't be slavery for as long as we had it.
I completely agree.
We have a duty to engage.
I don't think it's fair to characterize that we haven't been winning on the political side when it comes to the life issue, because there have been laws that have been put into place. There's been regulations that have been
incremental. There have been incremental wins,
and I think we can both agree.
But incremental for 40 years, like anyone else tired of that?
And 70 million children are in heaven right now, rejoicing with the Father right now. And yet we're still continued to be apathetic towards this issue. 2,400 babies that are going to die today over this issue. I completely agree. I want it to happen quickly, but I'm glad that it's at least happening we're moving towards a good projection towards that end. And I don't think it's fair to say that we're not winning, because we're not completely
I didn't say
winning.
we're winning. I did say on the culture side, when we're talking about the French issue, saying in the public sphere, I mean, truth is winning. And I think that's where I come down to always. It's like, truth is logical. Humans gravitate towards logic. Humans understand rationality. And like, if I'm always advocating for what hopefully God has put in my heart is truth and biblical principles, it will always be logical. It will ultimately be winsome, but I still have a duty to engage.
Yep, I completely agree.
And to win.
So do you think we should continue to engage in the terms of human rights? Because that is that's what politics essentially is, to protect human rights, right?
Yeah.
The government is in place. So if we're trying to communicate, for example, abortion as a human right, which way some businesses are advocating that it is a human right for good, but then we're advocating it's not for good, right? So where's the line there? Does that make sense?
So here's one of the things that I'm keenly aware of, and I think, and maybe this is going to be a topic for the next segment, because we've got to go to a break. One of the things I'm keenly aware of, and I would probably challenge you on, Chelsey, is I don't think that we're reasonable individuals. I think that we are largely emotional individuals, and that we pick and choose facts to be able to fit the narratives.
I'll tell you who's been emotional this segment. He's got a beard today, and
y'all.
I
got a beard. Hey, yo, haven't shaved. No. I'm just saying, like, I think it's very clear that we're emotional beings, that we pick and choose facts called selective exposure to be able to match what's already inside here and inside our brains. Jonathan Haidt talks about how moral reasoning isn't necessarily, we're not reporters that are looking for the facts. We're individuals that are collecting the facts that move us towards our particular end. We're not looking forward. We're backing in with our particular inclinations. And so that's why I would argue that it simply just can't be facts that we're presenting, but we've got to do so. We've got to emulate beauty. We have to utilize other ways to be able to advocate for the proposals and the policies that we so desire, because not everybody uses the same set of facts that we're using, and they've got other facts to be able to combat that. And so we've got to use sneak attacks as well. Augustine says that that's why we utilize beauty to go through the back door of our mind when the front door of logic is closed. But we've got to go to a break right now. If you'd like to call in and comment on this, and specifically to agree with me, not really, you can call in 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. We'll be back right after this.
So you sit down and do your budget, and you look at all your monthly costs and your bills and your income, and it seems like there's never quite enough. You know what would really help? Finding $500 a month to help balance things out. That is the typical savings, $500 a month for a family when you switch to MediShare for your health care. And when it comes to healthcare sharing ministries, MediShare is really the gold standard. It's been around for 25 years and has more than 400,000 members. It's been around so long and grown so much because it works. And whether you're single or married or have kids, this could make sitting down to do a monthly budget a lot more fun. $500 a month can more than cover a car payment or pay back loans, whatever. So join MediShare and go out to dinner to celebrate. Here's the number to call. They are incredibly kind and helpful to talk to. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
Tired of fake news? Support truth. Join Point of View's Truth Team and bring healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team. pointofview.net/team. Or 800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts. And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. A little animated today, I guess I could say. David, do you think am I a little animated?
Just a little bit. You're coming in hot, like what Andy Mineo would say, right?
Yeah, I'm coming in hot right now. But nevertheless, so grateful that you have decided to join us on Point of View. We have been talking about Christians approaching the public square specifically. Do you have to neglect civility for the sake of a political win? I think Chelsey would say that I'm mischaracterizing the argument. But we have opened up some of the phone lines. And so what I want to do is I want to take a couple of
phone calls really quickly. And so we've got Steve right now on the line. Steve, are you there?
Hi.
Hey, Steve, what's your point of view?
Thank you for taking my call. So I just wanted to comment that, it's interesting that I'm just reading a book about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and, I'm thinking there was a time when he approached things with more civility than he might have thought that was necessary towards the end, where he probably would have looked back, hindsight's 20/20, and said, I wish I had been more aggressive with my stance.
Yeah, Steve, I think you're reading my mind. That was the one example I was hoping nobody would call to mind right now. Because he's the quandary for our listeners. So you got Dietrich Bonhoeffer, again, was just he was the German theologian, pastor, made his way, actually studied, and then when Hitler was making his way and rising in power, Bonhoeffer was studying over in New York at Union Theological Seminary, realized that he was called by God to help out his people in Germany. So he actually leaves New York and goes back to Germany when Hitler is on the rise, and you're beginning to see the extent to which Hitler is going to reign and rule. And obviously, for those, sorry to finish the ending, spoiler alert, but Bonhoeffer was created an assassination attempt on Hitler, and just this beautiful treatise where he's rationally arguing for the assassination of Hitler from a biblical perspective. And so, Steve, you bring up a great example on this.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So that is, but again, I would argue that we don't have a Hitler situation that's on our hands right now. But again, I would highly recommend individuals to read Bonhoeffer. Bonhoeffer is just one of those individuals that is just, there's a richness and just a wrestling with the scriptures when it comes to engagement of the public square that I think we would do well to learn from. And I am indebted to Bonhoeffer, to say the least. Let's take one more phone call. We've got Daniel right now, I believe in Nevada. Daniel, is that you?
Yes.
Hey,
Nick,
Daniel.
thank you.
What's your point of view?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for taking my call. A longtime listener. Sure appreciate the millennial perspective. First, I'm grateful that here in my community in Reno, where I grew up, there's quite a fair amount of us that are somewhat involved in not letting things get pushed through. Similar sex ed curriculum as they're doing in California. There was just a meeting about that, and I know that's off the abortion issue, but somewhat related. So I'm just grateful that I know several people. We have Facebook pages. We have, we're in discussions. We're praying. We were praying, my small Bible group, home group. We prayed for our governor, who is very polar opposite from a lot of our values. We just were praying for him, literally, that because of us and a lot of people praying, I believe. 2 days later, he vetoed the first bill that he's vetoed since he took office in November, about the Electoral College, about just to go into the popular vote. Secondly, I appreciate your self-awareness with saying that you're a little animated today. I'm very fortunate that I was raised by a mom who is from South America, who came up here to get her master's degree in the early 70s. So I was really ingrained in me to respect and honor women, which I believe you do. I guess I'm also fortunate because I'm part of a church where women can do more than just serve in Sunday school. Mm-hmm. They can be elders, and if you're like a Southern Baptist, that might be a little bit countercultural. But I was just at a couple times in the discussion, just feeling a little bit frustrated, and this is just like an educational moment, perhaps, or not, just my perspective. With Chelsey, I just felt like you didn't really let her finish her thoughts several times, and I know that you had some self-awareness.
You there, Dan? Okay. So, Chelsey, I apologize if I did not properly honor you in our conversation back and forth.
Well, Nick, I forgive you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
I appreciate the caller and his sensitivity.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know if we lost the connection or what, but that was a really kind and winsome way to go about that conversation with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's go one more phone call. We'll take Gabriella in Georgia right now. Gabriella, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey.
Thank you for taking my call.
You're very welcome. What is your point of view?
Well, I have not been listening to this from the very beginning, so please forgive me if I'm saying things that don't sound like it pertains to what you're talking about. When it comes to the topic, especially politically, the topic of abortion, I have to say I'm more with the lawyer, I guess, in this, in the sense that when Jesus, saw that the Pharisees had an agenda and he knew what it was and he knew the evil end of it, he was not afraid to say to them, that they were vipers or serpents and that their father is the devil. And he was not afraid to say that boldly, and he was not being hateful. He was just saying out loud, the severity, the wickedness of which they're willing to go to take other people down to hell with them. When you see your child doing something wrong, like watching pornography, you don't go there and say mildly, well, you shouldn't do that. You scold them. You make them feel shame. They should feel ashamed for doing something that is evil or wrong. If you have no shame, you're not going to repent from what you're doing that is wrong. If there's no sense of guilt or shame or, that this is not the right thing to do, you won't change. And when it comes to the political arena, I believe that we should be forceful with our facts. We should not back down. We should not say it in a mild-mannered way, in the sense. We should say it boldly, like we're convicted, with passion that we believe in what we're talking about. I also think, though, that when somebody is going to an abortion clinic and looking to get an abortion, we need to seize the opportunity with a passion for love of life, for the love of that individual who's carrying that life, and for the love of the baby within, and to remind them how they started. Even if it came from bad circumstances, because God ultimately is the one who chooses who he's going to place a life into under whatever circumstances it might be, because he's the one that is the creator. He's the one that creates the life through our DNA. So, there's appropriate time for fierceness and boldness. He even tells you to come boldly to the throne room to ask for what you need, what you're requiring. And he also says to you that to be unashamed of him and unashamed of what he thinks. We should not go like with our tails between our legs and say, I'm sorry if I'm stepping on your toes. Truth is truth. And sometimes truth hurts. Actually, most of the time it hurts. Because usually when I'm facing truth, I got to tell you, I'm in the middle of trying to tell myself a lie. To console myself. The lukewarm church is going to be built on these kind of things where we want to smooth over and we don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers and so forth and so on. Well, if you're not targeting their personality and if you're only targeting the idea.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Gabrielle. I think that's one of the things that Chelsey and I were actually talking about over the break, is the idea that there's one thing to target an individual and their argument. It's another thing to target just the individual and level of character assassination. And when individuals are targeting character, more often than not, it's one, they're not relying on their argument. And two, I think that moves into the unchristian realm where you're trying to assassinate an individual. And I don't think that I think we both would agree that that's unbecoming of a Christian.
Yeah, one big amen to Gabrielle and almost everything she said. I think that's where we really have a difficult time here is, sometimes what's quote unquote civility is in the eye of the beholder and knowing where that line is. But I gave the Pharisee example to Nick on the break actually and said they would have said he was uncivil towards them. But he was at the end of the day speaking truth, and the gospel is offensive. And so much of what we have to say offends the world, but we believe we love the world enough to say it is how I would say that.
Yeah. So, we have to go to a break right now, but when we come back from the break, news you can lose. And so we will transition topics, not use, but lose, apparently. And so we will end the show with just a fun little segment on, in a shocking twist, you'll have to come and find out more right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. No one likes a test, at least not the kind that are unfair, meant as a pass-fail standard upon the character of a person. And that is why the framers of the U.S. Constitution included a prohibition on a religious test for office in Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution. But did that federal prohibition apply to the states? That's a question presented by Roy Torcaso to the Supreme Court of the United States. Torcaso, a professed atheist, wished to be a notary public in the state of Maryland, but could not declare his belief in God as required by the Maryland Constitution. Justice Hugo Black explained in Torcaso v. Watkins that the prohibition on religious tests for office in the U.S. Constitution was to be extended to state constitutions as well. He wrote, "Neither a state nor the federal government can constitutionally force a person to profess a belief or disbelief in any religion." Well, that's similar to what James Madison wrote in Federalist 52, where he explains that the door of this part of the federal government is open to merit of every description, whether native or adoptive, whether young or old, and without regard to poverty or wealth, or to any particular profession of religious faith. In other words, you don't have to pass a religious test to qualify for public office in America. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. Let me ask you, what if America's best attorneys from the very top law firms got together to defend religious freedom in court? That's exactly what's happening at First Liberty. And the best news? We're winning over 90% of our legal actions. Come learn more at firstliberty.org. You'll be encouraged. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Chelsey Youman of the First Liberty Institute and David Fraga. And we have been having a very robust conversation, I guess you would say. As one caller said, I was a little bit animated during this conversation. And Chelsey and I've been, how long? We've been doing this for like 2 years now. And so
maybe more than that, because I was pregnant with Foster, so going on 3.
Wow. So years. Like there's a part of me that just, I know where she's thinking to some degree when we get her into these arguments, and like we know where each other's are going to go to, our strong suits, so we try to stay away from each other's strong suits when we're arguing, because we both
I lean into the strong suits.
and then I know where she's thinking, so I think that's the reason why sometimes it can be interrupting. And I apologize obviously on there, and we talked about it off air, but nevertheless they just got a little heated, and so I'm grateful for the conversation. I think it was beneficial.
You know, I actually pulled up one of my life verses, which is the Lord has told you what is good, and it is that what He requires you to do, to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Mm-hmm. And so I think that just encompasses what we're both saying. That's a great way to say I'm dedicated to act justly and love mercy, and for everybody who that is all of our calling. Some of us do that through the church, some of us do it every day at home with our kids, some of us do it at our jobs, and I do it through my career. But I think that's a really good way to just sum up what we're called to do.
Yeah, we are running to run hard and do so. I think we're both Chelsey and I very much are ambitious individuals, and so we want to make a change, and we want to make heaven crash into earth. And especially with the political world as well. And so that's what makes some of these conversations so rich. But
we're going to have to end this conversation because we are in the news you can lose segment. That's right. This is becoming a key part of the Millennial Roundtable, where I'm taking a social science survey, a question, research project, and just kind of illuminating kind of a part of the human spirit, but also hopefully try to get a biblical piece about this as well, to recognize the truth that all things, he holds all things together in him, and he is before all things as well. And so why not talk about dodgeball today? If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. But according to the Washington Post, dodgeball is a tool of oppression used to dehumanize others. According to some researchers, dodgeball in phys ed classes teaches students to dehumanize and harm their peers, professors from 3 Canadian universities said in a presentation at the Congress of the Humanities and Social Sciences in Vancouver. Going forward, the researchers observed that the more athletic and authoritative students in the class established rules and practices without input from other students, including creating their own teams, which allowed them to gang up on other students. So what they're arguing for, essentially, is they're trying to use research to be able to advance the idea that kids don't need to play dodgeball anymore. And Chelsey, I'm not going to lie, David's been kind of quiet for the first part of a little bit.
But you know what? David is a competitor.
I bet David killed in dodgeball when he was in elementary school and middle school.
Not at all.
Really?
No,
What?
not at all. I never really became an athlete until college.
Really?
My last year of high school. Yeah.
So you were a wimp.
Would you have kicked or thrown the ball?
I was the guy who was picked last, and I would try to throw the ball, but I didn't know how.
You were picked last?
Always.
What a loser.
Always.
No, I'm
Hey,
just
man.
kidding. I'm just kidding. No, so you were picked last, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us your tactic, because I think this was illuminated between Chelsey and I. So Chelsey, tell us your tactic.
Okay, so first and foremost, I got pegged a lot because I was way too ambitious in my goals, which is pretty much my life.
Okay.
But I would be like the first to the center line as fast as I could to grab up all the balls and then retreat as fast as I could.
Unfortunately.
And then the most terrifying moment to me would be if there's one person left on the other side and me, because I got an arm, but I would get pegged.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us did you end up grabbing the ball first, or so you were pretty quick?
No, I'm not that fast.
Okay, you weren't that fast.
No.
So you were the person that ran out there very quickly and realized
probably couldn't get a ball and then
got
retreated.
pegged.
Yeah.
And begged. So here's what I realized about myself. I didn't run out quickly because I knew I was slow. I was unathletic. I was probably about as fast as 56K modem when it came to speed in middle school and really high school. I mean, even today I'm kind of slow. But I was slow. I was unathletic. And so I really didn't bode well. So I knew my strategy wasn't I'm going to try to seize center court and try to get a ball. My strategy was just survive, according to Tropic Thunder. And so I would just stand on the wall. I would be a wallflower and just try to dodge left to right. But unfortunately, that didn't work out very well either because I just didn't dodge very well. But here's one of the funny things about this. So research has shown that it improves hand-eye coordination, strength training, and agility and balance. But kind of one of the thrusts behind this, undergirding this, is the cultural narrative known as safetyism. And this was put out by Jonathan Haidt in his book, The Coddling of the American Mind. Safety has become a sacred value and a determining factor regarding our participation in particular activities. And so if it hinders our safety, chances are that we are either going to try to, 1, rule it out, or 2, keep individuals from participating in it. And so as the resident mom of the Millennial Roundtable, 2 kids, are your kids going to play dodgeball? Are you going to allow them to play?
They're playing right now as we speak. I mean, they're never not playing dodgeball in my house. Yeah, I think it's great. It's not there's not a high concussion risk.
Okay.
I think it's really good to kind of know where you are, to get pegged a little bit and to humbly, really experience.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. So, at this rate, my second, Crawford, who's 8 months old, is already trying to walk. So he's pretty much the beast of the house.
Okay.
I'll just say that. He's our athlete.
So you see value in them losing in dodgeball if they just happen to lose?
Yeah. I think it would foster a lot of good to lose. Okay. Who can peg him right now and let him know? A prime example would be, I will tell this story. I raved by myself, both boys at the pool, because I was like, I've got this. I'm super mom. What could go wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Before I could even get out of the pool after him, Foster was at the foot of a 2-story high mega water slide.
Wow.
By the time I caught up with him, he was 1 foot in at the top. The lifeguard at the top did not even have time to stop him. And he had the gall to argue with me. I called you, Mommy. I said, you did not call me. He said, it's okay. I'll call you next time. 2 years old.
Wow.
Like, someone needs to peg him with a dodgeball. It can't be me. Nobody called. But, like, he could do with a little dose of reality.
I love it. And so, David, when children come your way, are they playing dodgeball? Yes or no?
No.
No? Why?
Oh, no dodgeball.
Why is that?
My kids.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were
Your
saying like
kids.
if I'm gonna hang out with kids. I was like, okay, never mind. No, yes, they're gonna play dodgeball because I don't believe in those participation trophies. You know?
Okay.
We talked about that in the past, and that's what triggered when I heard this article. Participation trophies, equality. Every time there's someone trying to put the same playing field, it's just not gonna work out. You know, kids are still gonna get hurt in a way, but not in terms of physically, but emotionally, and it's just not healthy.
Yeah.
It's really not.
Yeah, there's
you learn how to lose.
There's a power, and so here's where I would argue from the biblical perspective, there's a power to getting pegged. Essentially, that there's great value in failure and rejection. You may not win in dodgeball, but I think you're earning and gaining a life lesson that is shaping the character of your soul and hopefully not creating a bruise in the meantime. Like we look through the biblical narrative, you can think of Joseph getting betrayed when he was in prison, but it was in the midst of the betrayal that he sat in that prison and learned a system that he would just years later come to lead and be the second hand to Pharaoh. I think about Peter and all the failure that he had, whether it be walking out on the water, getting out of the boat, whether it be rejecting Jesus. There was a resilience that was inculcated in his spirit through those betrayals and through those failures that I think proved him to be a well-received rock upon which Christ built this church. Yes, it's difficult going to Ouchtown, but it is formative going to Ouchtown because I think it builds a spirit within us. So thank you so much for joining us on Point of View. I'm Nick Pitts, and we'll see you next time.
So you sit down and do your budget, and you look at all your monthly costs and your bills and your income, and it seems like there's never quite enough. You know what would really help? Finding $500 a month to help balance things out. That is the typical savings, $500 a month for a family when you switch to MediShare for your health care. And when it comes to healthcare sharing ministries, MediShare is really the gold standard. It's been around for 25 years and has more than 400,000 members. It's been around so long and grown so much because it works. And whether you're single or married or have kids, this could make sitting down to do a monthly budget a lot more fun. $500 a month can more than cover a car payment or pay back loans, whatever. So join MediShare and go out to dinner to celebrate. Here's the number to call. They are incredibly kind and helpful to talk to. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
Tired of fake news? Support truth. Join Point of View's Truth Team and bring healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team. pointofview.net/team or 800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly and yet